Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to London and free tours by foot. Firstly, introductions again. My name is Sinead, and I'm one of the regular tour guides here in London. I may have met some of you on my City of London and City of Westminster tour. Now, today's video, however, is possibly one of my favourites to conduct. This is the rock and roll tour of London. A nostalgic tour taking you back to the 60s, the 70s and the 80s. Today I'm going to be talking about Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, the Who, the Rolling Stones. We're going to talk about Queen and a little bit more in between, Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. Now, a lot of these sites are off the beaten track. There is hours and hours and hours of rock and roll history in London, so this is just a highlight tour. And I'd love to welcome you all in person when you eventually can travel again. And we'll go into much more detail about the rock and roll history here. We start our tour today in Mason's Yard, where John met Yoko Ono and where Jimi Hendrix upstaged Eric Clapton. Then a quick stroll through the Burlington Arcade, one of the oldest covered shopping markets in London, before heading to Savile Row, where the Beatles performed live together for the very last time. Next, we head around the corner to where the cover of The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars album was photographed, and where David Bowie's impromptu memorial here in London was located. Then into Soho, where Paul met Linda, before entering Carnaby Street and Soho, where the swinging 60s and the punk movement began of the 70s. And I'll also show you where the auditions took place for the greatest rock and roll band in the world, the Rolling Stones. And finally, we'll head to the old Trident Studios, one of the most important recording studios in rock history, before ending this tour at the legendary Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club, the venue where Jimi Hendrix played his very last gig. Now let's rock and roll, ladies and gents. Today, just to give you a little sneak preview of what's to come, we're going to talk about the life, the loves, the drugs, the tragedies, the loves. Today, we have you on our first stop in the incredible Mason's Yard. Now, as you can see, very, very quiet. And when you come to London and you look this place up, it's pretty much off the beaten track. And that was fully intentional, a nice, secluded, private area. And you'll understand why in a moment. Now, today we're going to talk about two particular buildings here in Mason's Yard. Number one, the Stephen Ongping and Guy Papiat Art Gallery now. And number two, the Scotch of St. James's Club here in Mason's Yard. Now, the area itself at the moment is beautiful bookstores and antiquarian bookstores and beautiful clothing stores in the area. Very rich part of town. And also this gorgeous gallery you see here, the Stephen Ongping and Guy Papiat Art Gallery now, but in 1966, ladies and gents, this was the Indica Art Gallery. And this is where John met for the very first time, met the love of his life, Yoko Ono. Now let's go all the way back to that night in 1966. John Lennon arrived here and Yoko Ono was hosting an exhibition. It was called The Art of Unfinished Objects. Now, she was a relatively unknown artist at the time, and John Lennon fancied himself a bit of an art connoisseur. Now, a lot of her work involved, well, human interaction, let's say. For example, one of her exhibits involved you hammering a nail into a ladder that was inside in the building. Now, she was charging 5 shillings for the privilege of you hammering this nail into her exhibit. So John Lennon himself liked the look of that, so he decided, right, let's give this a go. Now, he took his hammer and took his nail, and of course he was approached immediately by a very feisty and coy Yoko Ono, who said to him, "Excuse me, sir, where's my 5 shillings, please?" To which he replied, "I don't carry cash, I'm a Beatle." And she replied, he said, "How about you give me an imaginary nail and an imaginary hammer, I'll hammer that in and we'll call it quits." Now, terrible punchline, but essentially, this was the very first time they met. Now, it's also important to note that they did not get together for another year or so, but it was absolutely, without a doubt, the attraction was instantaneous. So the very first place that John and Yoko actually met and got together. That was called the Indica Art Gallery in 1966. But the reason I'm bringing you here, folks, is this incredible building here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Scotch of St. James's Club in Mason's Yard. Now, 1966, we all know the Beatles and particularly the Rolling Stones. They were the top two. And they were at the height of their fame. And we're talking about the year of Beatlemania. Now, these guys could not go outside their front doors. Everywhere they went, they were mobbed by teenage girls and crying and fainting and the drama. You've all seen the airport footage and the concert footage. So that made their social life very, very difficult. So what happened here in London is these exclusive members-only clubs started to pop up everywhere. And the only way you got inside the door here is, number one, you were a VIP. Number two, your name was on the guest list. And even some of these clubs actually had little passwords you would have to whisper through the trapdoor in order to get inside the building. Now, naturally, that kept it exclusive. And then rock stars could hang out together and movie stars and do whatever it was they weren't supposed to do on a night out and not worry about press intrusion or fan intrusion. Now, that doesn't make my job very easily because there was one rule in this club. In all these members' clubs, what happens in the club stays in the club. And they really did live by that privacy rule because, as I said, it gave them some sort of semblance of normality or privacy in their social lives. So again, that doesn't make my job very easy. We don't know an awful lot about what happened in these clubs, but we do know this terrific story. And we're going to go all the way back to Chas Chandler. Now, Chas Chandler, ladies and gents, was the bass player with the Animals. We all know the Animals, of course, the House of the Rising Sun. Now, when the Animals were breaking up, Chas Chandler decided he was going to capitalize on the musical agent market and make a little bit of extra cash on the side and head around the clubs in London, see if he could find a new act, promote him, make some extra business from him, and obviously make a lot of money by making this act famous. Now, he had a look around London and nothing really was grabbing his eye. So he flew to New York City. Now, when he got to New York City, he struck absolute gold. Because in a club in New York, he came across a black American guitarist playing rock and roll music. And that, of course, was James Marshall Hendrix. Now, Jimi Hendrix was on the scene in New York, and we all know that. But to be honest, people weren't really identifying with him because black artists weren't particularly known for playing rock and roll music at the time. They were more inclined towards soul or Motown and jazz. So Chas Chandler approached him, said to him, listen, you're terrific. The scene is in London. Come back with me. We'll try and get you some gigs. We'll get you on stage. We'll see how it goes. Jimi Hendrix was in. He had nothing to lose. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in 1966, when they returned, Jimi Hendrix was brought here by Chas Chandler. Now, Chas Chandler and Jimi Hendrix headed into the club. And on stage that night, inside the club, can you actually believe, was Eric Clapton and his band Cream, performing for all the exclusive rock stars inside, members of which would have been the likes of the Beach Boys and the Who, and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were both members inside in this club. So Chas Chandler approaches Eric and says to Eric, listen, brought this kid back with me from New York, he's good. Do you mind if he gets up on stage, has a little jam with you, we'll see how it goes, just introduce him to the crowd. Eric Clapton's not intimidated, coolest, most famous guitarist in the world. He said, yeah, of course, bring the kid up on stage. Jimi Hendrix, ladies and gentlemen, gets on stage in this very club with Eric Clapton, two of the greatest guitarists in history, jamming together. And they do 3 sets, 3 songs, actually. They did an incredible version of Killing Floor that particular evening. Now, on stage that night, Jimi Hendrix blew the roof off the room. Everybody was blown away by this kid. Nobody can believe how talented this kid was. And what's funny about it is Eric Clapton, presumably, well, the rumor is he stormed off the stage, headed outside the club, is smoking furiously and looking quite worried and perturbed. And of course, Chas Chandler approaches him and he said to him, what's wrong, Eric? Is everything okay? And he said, you told me the kid was good, but you never told me he was that good. Some suggest that he actually said, I'm going home to practice, ladies and gents. So this tiny, quaint little square here, nobody even knows actually exists, particularly Londoners, and you will see that today when we're passing these lovely venues and Londoners are oblivious to them and they're walking past them every day. They always have a little earwig in, but occasionally that'll work in our benefit. You'll always meet some cool people, and there's some very cool senior citizens in the city. Never forget that, ladies and gents, who actually lived through that era. And sometimes we meet them along the way and they can contribute. But again, the incredible Mason's Yard at the back of Piccadilly, and Scotch of St. James's Club, and where John met Yoko. Oh no. Now, the club today is still exclusive. We do know that there was a birthday party, I believe, for Rihanna in there at one stage. Metallica had a birthday party and a jam in there. I have tried to get inside the building. I didn't manage to get in one day and maybe I shouldn't admit that on camera. I got a photograph of all the people that played in there. And we will hopefully put a link to that for you so you can see the amount of people that played in there. So that's the first stop on our tour. We're going to head on up now next to one of the most exclusive men's tailoring streets in the world. And this is the incredible Savile Row. And we'll have a look at the tailors, but we're heading there for the Beatles, ladies and gents. So as you can see, folks, there's some amazing shots there of Fortnum and Mason. And just for your own point of interest, we are on the rock and roll tour, but we do visit here on our Soho Piccadilly Circus in Chinatown tour, which is also available on the Free Tours by Foot London website. I tend to conduct that myself as well, but Fortnum and Mason is one of the oldest department stores in London. Stunning store. And what's significant about it is right up on top, just up above the clock there, you'll see what is called the Royal Warrant. Now, the Royal Warrant is issued to shops that have been supplying goods and services to the Queen and the royal family for 5 years or more. Highly coveted, as you can imagine, on any shop front here in London. In fact, the majority of shop fronts along Piccadilly here have the Royal Warrant, and 3 members of the royal family can issue it. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II herself, her husband the Duke of Edinburgh, and Prince Charles. It can also famously be stripped from a store at any time, depending on the discretion of the royal family. But if you get an opportunity when you're in London, or if you join me on the tour, we'll bring you in and you'll get some amazing jams and chutneys and wines. Their Scotch selection is special. An amazing place here in London and an institution, Fortnum and Mason. But for right now, as I mentioned, we are going to head up towards Savile Row, because I want to talk to you about the Beatles up here and massive Beatles history on the way. But part of this tour, and of course a part of London is so visual. Everywhere you go, there is something you can film and talk about. So I want to bring you through the Burlington Arcade, the stunning arcade, exclusive shopping again. But don't worry, we're going to head into a bit more gentrified and trendy Soho later on the tour as well. But Burlington itself was one of the oldest covered shopping arcades in London. And for that reason, it actually has its own security. And they're so elegantly dressed. And you'll have a look in a moment at what are called the Burlington Beatles. Now, years ago, it did attract the wrong type, the ladies of the night. Thieves and vagabonds. So of course, when the thieves would arrive here, the ladies of the night and the thieves had their own little language, and they tended to whistle to warn each other about the Burlington Beatles coming if they were attempting to rob one of the establishments. So what they did was they banned you from whistling in the Burlington Arcade, the stunning, stunning shopping market. Now, one day, Paul McCartney, one of our famous Beatles, of course, was taking a little stroll through here himself, and he happened to be whistling, and he was approached by the Beatle, but he was given a pass. So effectively, Paul McCartney is the only man in the world who is allowed to whistle inside the Burlington Arcade. Now, I'm not quite sure if we're allowed to film through here, but we're going to take a little stroll through. So welcome to Savile Row, folks. Now, one of the most exclusive men's tailoring streets in the world. Tailors for the rock stars and movie stars, particularly busy around Oscar week, which I believe is postponed this year. But prime ministers and presidents and the royal family have all had their suits tailored along here. And I will show you a few along the way. But the reason we're here on a rock and roll tour, ladies and gentlemen, is this particular building here. Now, this is number 3 Savile Row. And in 1969, this was the Apple Studios. And this is where the Beatles did most of their recording outside of Abbey Road. Now, by 1969, we all know the Beatles are not getting along. John and Yoko are very much on the scene. There's a big division in the band between John and Paul McCartney. It's even rumoured that Ringo Starr insisted on recording in separate rooms to the rest of the Beatles. So it's all falling apart. But the one thing they do agree on is they are making the Let It Be movie. And they wanted to find, some live footage to include at the end of that movie. To finish off the actual movie with a live performance. So on the 30th of January, ladies and gents, 1969, all 4 Beatles got on the roof of that very building. And they performed a live open-air concert in the middle of central London. And what we know now, what of course we didn't know on the day, was that would be the very last time all 4 Beatles ever played together live. Now, just to reiterate to you where the roof was, just to be a bit specific, if you see where the panelling is across there, the white panelling, the top 2 floors were an extension over the years, so they were actually quite visible from the street. Now, as you can imagine, you're walking to work, you're in the middle of central London, you walk down Savile Row, and next thing you hear, get back, and you look up and you see the greatest rock and roll band in the world playing a free concert in the middle of central London. The DJs hit the airwaves and they scream, "The Beatles are in Savile Row, get here!" And the inevitable happened. Hundreds of people started coming from every single corner. But the story I want to tell you involves the building behind us. Now, this building, ladies and gents, in 1969 was a bank. Now, there's a gentleman on the top floor of that building in his office, and presumably a rather boring workday, and he looks outside the window and he sees some commotion and he hears all this noise and he looks across. Now, can you imagine? This guy has a front row view, the best seat in the house of the greatest rock and roll band in the world. Now, any human being would be ecstatic. I'm sure you agree. So, not this particular guy, however. He decided he's going to ring the police to complain about noise. Now, where in the world? I never want to meet a man like that in my lifetime. So now the police have to act on the complaint and they cite health and safety, etc. So they come to the building and they ask the Beatles to stop this concert. Now, the Beatles, they said absolutely no problem. They had no intention of shutting down. They come again and they say, "Guys, if you do not shut down this concert, we are coming to arrest you." Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is 1969. The Beatles have been arrested so many times for far more serious offences. Being arrested didn't faze them. In fact, they thought it would make amazing footage for the Let It Be movie, so they actually welcomed being arrested. So the 3rd time, they cut the power in the building. But not before we got 42 minutes of the most spectacular Beatles footage that's out there. And it did make it into the Let It Be movie. But of course, I strongly suggest you look that up on YouTube tonight and see it. Incredible footage and an incredible day in London. Now, the door itself has become famous for Beatles fans all over the world. It has been defaced. It's had to be replaced actually 4 times. Beatles fans are leaving their little personal messages over the years and over the years. The door is rumoured to be owned by 3 out of 4 Beatles own a number 3 Savile Row door. I believe Paul McCartney is the only one who doesn't own the door. So this is actually the first time we can get back up, because in more recent times it had been bought by Abercrombie and Fitch Children's Department. That's since closed down again. So now you can officially get back up on the steps. So please join us and come and get your picture and your selfie with a part of rock and roll history. Now, if you are interested in seeing one of these doors, it's in the rock and roll, Hard Rock Cafe, my apologies, in the Hard Rock Cafe and their memorabilia. So another incredible piece of Beatles. Now, they finally got their circular blue plaque. Now, we're going to see quite a few of these today, these heritage plaques in London. Somebody lived here, somebody died here, somebody worked here, somebody played music here. Always keep an eye out for them around London. You'll never know what you'll see. And again, of course, I'll show you quite a few of those today in Soho. Now, as you can imagine along here, let's just say the tailors were none too happy about these rock star hippies in their exclusive neighborhood. But one of those tailors was a little bit more business savvy than the rest. And his name was Tommy Nutter. And his attitude is these guys are multimillionaires. I'll make suits for them. So Tommy Nutter, a very famous, now he's been replaced since, but I just want to show you, he's Chittleborough and Morgan now, but he tailored 3 out of the 4 suits on the iconic Abbey Road album. He's also tailored flamboyant costumes for Elton John. He tailored the Joker suit for Jack Nicholson in Batman as well. So quite a few important tailors along here. But before we get to Tommy Nutter's, and I'm about to show you any minute, just want to show you this one. This is the Huntsman, and this is where they filmed the movie The Kingsman, the Secret Service movie. And if you remember in that, they had their MI6 secret operations downstairs here in the basement. They even put up a little tribute to Kingsman, established in 1849. So just a bit of a movie trivia for you. Now this, of course, was Tommy Nutter's, the tailor to the Rockstars. His studio would have been right down here. And I also want to show you this gentleman up here. He's one of the oldest tailors in London. He's called Henry Poole & Co. Now this gentleman has over 40 warrants. A couple of them are on display here, and you'll see them here at Henry Poole & Co. Lovely chaps in here. I meet them quite regularly during my tour. So we have, he's tailored to the late Emperor Napoleon III, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and Haile Selassie. And Haile Selassie, of course, the god of Rastafarianism. So that's quite cool in this area. Now, we're going to leave Savile Row, because next I want to talk about one of London's iconic legends. 2016 was a very tough year for music fans. We all know that. Every single month, somebody died. They kept hitting us and hitting us and hitting us. The 2 that really affected me the most, I guess, would have been David Bowie and Prince. And of course, we lost the legend that was Leonard Cohen that year as well. So I just want to show you a little secret hideout place to do with David Bowie. And that's coming up next on the tour. So, as we mentioned about the blue heritage plaques earlier on, we also have the green ones here, ladies and gents. And the reason I'm bringing you here is this is to commemorate the front cover of the album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. This is actually where David Bowie posed for the front cover of that album. Now, David Bowie's death on the 10th of January in 2016 was a massive shock to the community here in London. 2 days prior, he had released that album, A Black Star, of course, to coincide with his 69th birthday. And people were super excited about the album sales, and 2 days later, he had died. He had suffered from liver cancer for over 18 months. He died in his New York City apartment in Lafayette Street. But this is where people came to lay their tributes to Bowie on the day. And the shock in London and the upset was felt here on that particular day. All these incredible businesses were playing Bowie music. But one particular event that occurred that evening was a lady announced a street party in Brixton to celebrate the life of David Bowie. What was incredible about it is, of course, it was one of those few artists that I felt like I should be there, and over 5,000 people attended. Now, I will show you some of my own photos in this video, ladies and gents. We'll flash them up alongside that amazing night where nearly 5,000 people came to commemorate David Bowie. But just to show you something else, on the back of that Ziggy Stardust album, and the Spiders Rise and Fall and the Spiders from Mars, is also this incredible telephone box here. And people have made it like their makeshift shrine to David Bowie. And if you look at the back cover, you will see David Bowie himself posing inside the telephone box. And just take a quick look here. Live, love, we love you, David Bowie. Bowie, we were in your home, we love you. So many incredible tributes to David Bowie. So they've made it like their makeshift gravestone, if you like. So an incredible tribute to an amazing artist, and a huge shock to the community when he actually died here in London. But the one thing we did, we gave him a great send-off in Brixton, and I will show you some photos of that along the way. So the next point in our tour, ladies and gents, is we're going to head in towards Soho. Now, Soho is a wealth of rock and roll history. We're going to see Carnaby Street. We're going to talk about the Rolling Stones and see some of the most famous recording studios in the world. So, if you're enjoying the tour so far, why don't you go ahead and click that like button and help others discover this video. And if you would like to watch more walking tour videos like this one, then also consider subscribing to our channel and click that notification bell so that you don't miss any new videos. In addition to walking tour videos, we also offer videos on London travel tips, as well as videos covering day trips from London. And if you have any place that you would like to see us offer a video tour of, then leave your suggestions in the comments section below. And lastly, if you'd like to buy your tour guide a pint or a cup of coffee, links to do so are also in the description below. Now back to the tour. Welcome to Soho, ladies and gents. Soho is what I like to think of a little city inside the greater city of London. Now, Soho gets its name. First of all, a lot of people ask me this. It's the one question I get asked all the time. Has Soho got anything to do with the south of Houston in New York City? Absolutely nothing. Completely coincidental that they are both the same. Soho was a 17th century hunting cry. And in the 17th century, when this area was just fields, it was used for hunting purposes. So essentially, when the hunt would begin and they were suited and booted and the hunt would be about to start, they'd sound the foghorn and they'd cry, Soho, or tally-ho. So nothing too interesting about that, actually, but that's the origin of the name. Now, Soho has seen an influx of massive migration over the years. You had the French Huguenots, you had the Greek immigrants and the Italians and the French immigrants. That has given this area an amazing reputation for some of the best restaurants in London. But not only that, it's also famous for its rock and roll music and its clubs and its bars. Now, we're going to go back to the 1960s again. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the very famous, now it's called the Court Club. They did change the name, but on this awning here, the original name still stands. This was the Bag of Nails Club. Now, when I mentioned earlier on to you about exclusive membership, that same rule applied to this particular club. But the Bag of Nails is famous for so many particular reasons. One particular reason, we mentioned Jimi Hendrix's first appearance on stage with Eric Clapton at the Scotch of St. James's Club in Mason's Yard. This was the location of the very first gig of Jimi Hendrix and the Experience. Now, Charles Chandler is rumored to have sold 9 of Jimmy's guitars in order to fund that gig. But I think we'll all agree that turned out to be a pretty wise and financial investment for the future. Not only that, it's rumored to be where Paul McCartney met the love of his life, Linda Eastman. Paul McCartney was here at a Georgie Fame gig, it's rumored to be, and Linda Eastman was an American photojournalist who was in town to photograph Georgie Fame. And this is where they met and their beautiful love story began. It's also rumored to be where John and Christine McVie, of Fleetwood Mac, of course, met for the very first time. So again, some amazing rock and roll history inside in the Bag of Nails Club. Now, we spoke about the circular blue plaques. This one's a little difficult to see, but Aaron, our fabulous cameraman, will be able to get them up for you there. So they've put up these plaques to commemorate these very famous instances. Another one of those exclusive Rockstar members-only clubs. I did try to get inside this building, actually. So, no, your name's not there, you're not getting in. But next I want to bring you to one of the most famous streets in London, where the term was coined, swinging 60s. And you cannot talk about 60s London without talking about the fashion industry and the incredible Carnaby Street. But let's take a little sneak peek through here. I want to show you the incredible Carnaby Court, Kingly Court, my apologies. Now, you're never going to be short of something to eat in London. There's such an array of amazing restaurants, and veganism is having a moment right now, and rightfully so. So you have fabulous vegetarian and vegan options as well. Now, naturally, because of COVID-19. Everything is closed down at the moment. But you will see layers and layers, floors and floors of businesses in here. I think probably one of my favorites is the Rum Kitchen. It's like a little hidden gem. Amazing Caribbean food, and of course, cocktails. So welcome to Carnaby Street. And there's the amazing street here. Now, there's been a massive gentrification in Soho over the years, and it's become a bit more upmarket and exclusive high-end designers. But Carnaby Street was the centre of rock and roll history. And of course, we cannot mention rock and roll without mentioning fashion. I mean, this is the street where Mary Quant debuted the miniskirt in the 1960s. Pretty much any picture you see of Twiggy in the 1960s, you can be pretty much guaranteed she's here on Carnaby streets. Then, of course, you had the punk movement of the 70s and the 80s and the Sex Pistols and the Clash, and we all know what Vivienne Westwood did for the punk movement as well, and the fashion part of it. Then, of course, the mods and the skinheads and the Quadrophenia era, the Jam and Paul Weller. It was an incredible place of music and vibes. Even Don Arden, who was the manager of Ozzy Osbourne, of course, and Black Sabbath, had an office here on Carnaby Street. He also, for a period of time, actually managed the Small Faces. But along this street, of course, over the years, as I said, we've seen a massive gentrification. So it's become a bit more of a high-end fashionista den nowadays, ladies and gents. So not entirely as it was, but we will flash up again some images so you can see. But if I was really to condense rock and roll history and what Soho is all about, the perfect example is this amazing mural here. Now, ladies and gents, this is called the Soho Mural. Now, a group of amateur artists got together in the 1990s and they painted this, and every single person you see up there all has one thing in common with Soho, and that is that they all, at one time or another, lived here in Soho. Now, let's go through just a couple of the characters for you. So over here on the right-hand side, you have Ronnie Scott, the very famous jazz musician, and we will be visiting Ronnie Scott's jazz club towards the end of the tour. Right behind him, smoking the cigarette, on the left of him is Dylan Thomas, the famous writer, the Welsh writer. And then you have Brendan Behan, one of my own fellow countrymen, the famous Irish writer with the pint of Guinness, no coincidence there in front of him. And of course, the gentleman at the back in the pinstripe suit with the fedora hat is George Melly. But the fourth central characters around the clock. Firstly, in the yellow jacket, you have Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Massive history here in London. He actually composed his very first symphony here in London at the tender age of 8 while on an international music tour with his family. That was called K16, and he composed that in Ebury Street on Belgravia. In fact, our Mayfair and Tiaras and Ferraris tour takes a little trip around there, so definitely have a look at that particular tour as well. Karl Marx, Das Kapital, of course, lived here for a period of time in dire poverty, and I will show you in his famous Communist Manifesto. Of course, I will show you where he lived later on. The lady in blue is Teresa Cornelles. She was a famous Italian soprano. And finally, the gentleman in the orange jacket, the effervescent Lothario Casanova. No doubt fleeing persecution from husbands all over mainland Europe. Now, in the meantime, if you have a look at the clock, it's fabulous, actually, on the hour, every hour, and regretfully, we've just missed it, but this installation happens. So basically what happens is, when it strikes, the clock strikes 12, a can of Coke comes up from behind Das Kapital, and Karl Marx takes a little sip. Teresa Cornelles winks at Casanova, and he attempts to kiss her. All very silly and ridiculous, but if you happen to be here, make sure you have a look. So the beautiful Soho Mural. So we're going to move on. I just want to show you one more store up here. I think one of the biggest fashion movements, particularly in the late 70s, well, the 60s, 70s and 80s, actually, if you remember the whole Quadrophenia era, were the mods, and Paul Weller and the Jam, and of course, later on, he was the Style Council. But this is a very typical mod clothing store here. And there's a couple of pictures in there of some very famous people who have shopped in there. And I just want to show you all along the line here. You have, of course, Liam Gallagher is there as well, Paul Weller himself. Great little store. There's Liam, styling it out as he always does. So next we're going to bring you down and bring you back to 1962, and I'll bring you back to one of the most famous pubs in London, where the auditions were held for the greatest rock and roll band in the world. I'll let you guess. We're on the way to Berwick Street and the Bricklayers Arms pub. Just a very brief mention about Berwick Street here. Now, when you do come and meet us in person, ladies and gents, there's an incredible food market all along here, and it runs every day, usually from 11 till about 3. But the interesting thing about this street as well, it's also known as the Golden Mile of vinyl. And if you plan on doing any record shopping, shopping for records in London, this is where you need to come. This along with Camden. Camden is another tour on our actual schedule. It has a lot of rock and roll history in Camden as well, particularly surrounding the punk movement and Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious. But Berwick Street, if you just take a quick look behind us here, Erin is going to show you. Obviously, it's not very obvious right now, but for my British guests that are joining us on the tour, this is where they shot the front cover of the album, What's the Story, Morning Glory, with Oasis, ladies and gents. But the reason we're here is an incredible place coming up just around the corner. And I want to take you back to 1962. Now, 1962 was an incredible era for music here in London. And this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm bringing you here to show you on Duck Lane. Now, this incredible record store, the Sounds of the Universe record store, but in 1962, as you can see, it looks quite like a pub. This was known as the Bricklayers Arms pub. And the Bricklayers Arms pub is where the likes of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards all hung out and drank together. It was also where Brian Jones hung out and drank inside in this pub. In fact, Ian Stewart was a barman inside in the Bricklayers Arms pub. Now, Brian Jones held the auditions for the Rolling Stones. He put the band together, he marketed them, he got their first gig in the Marquee Club, which is right around the corner. But Brian Jones, he didn't last too long in the band, but we'll talk about him in just a moment. But he recognized the star potential immediately in Mick Jagger. I mean, Mick Jagger, let's just say characteristically, is not the best looking man in the world. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not attracted to him. He doesn't exactly have the very best voice either, or best vocal cords, shall we say. But whatever it is, Mick Jagger has it in abundance. Sex appeal, panache, stage presence like no other. Brian Jones recognized that, and straight away, Mick Jagger, you're in. Now, Keith Richards had his own stylistic way of playing guitar, and a very funky, cool human being, born to be a rock star. I mean, what's left to say about the man who falls out of a coconut tree in his 60s? And nobody even questioned why he was in that coconut tree, because he's Keith Richards. It's expected behavior, entirely expected behavior. Straight away, Keith Richards got in. Now, Ian Stewart also got in for a short period of time, once they had Charlie Watts, the drummer then as well, and Bill Wyman, they say, only got in the band because he shared his cigarettes and he had a spare amplifier. But that's where it all began for the Rolling Stones, and even though Brian Jones doesn't get much recognition for the formation of the Rolling Stones, I truly believe he was a central figure in the band that we know today. Now, Brian Jones didn't last too long. Regretfully, he spiraled into a horrendous year of drug abuse. He'd been arrested several times, and of course, when the Rolling Stones went on tour in the United States, he was denied his own visa, his American visa. Not that it was entirely relevant, because a year later, he did die at the age of 27. He was found at the bottom of a swimming pool at the back of his house here in the UK. Now, Brian Jones became part of what is now the infamous Forever 27 Club. And it's an incredible theory, well, conspiracy theory about this, is that they all die so young. Now, the Forever 27 Club kind of originates with Robert Johnson, a famous 1930s blues guitarist, who you'll know about the crossroads and selling his soul to the devil for the ability to play guitar. And boy, could this guy play. He was the first to die at 27. You know the rest yourself. And if you have any extras, please put them in the comments below. Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison, you had Jimi Hendrix, all died at 27. So the birthplace of the Rolling Stones. And next, I want to show you where they played their very first gig here in London. The incredible Marquee Club, a staple in rock and roll history in London. Now, the Marquee was the who's who. Everybody played. In fact, the only one, it's easier to remember, who didn't play in there was the Beatles. And the Marquee Club was located here on Wardour Street. Now, the Marquee closed down in the, I believe it was in the 90s, but in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, this is where you came to see the up-and-coming bands. This is where Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, The Clash, Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Pete Townsend, of course, and The Who, they all played inside here. This is where The Jam and Paul Weller and Prince has even played in here. An incredible place. Now, the queue ordinarily for the Marquee would come all the way down this street to the incredible pub here, The Ship. And I just want to show you where its location was. Now, structurally, the damage to the building from these incredible gigs over the years. One that apparently that stands out, one of the most famous ones, was Status Quo. When they gigged in here, they nearly brought the roof down inside in the joint. But the Marquee, there really truly is nothing like it since in London. And live music has suffered a bit of a hit here in London because, well, it's a lot of residential properties now, so music is not allowed to play after 11 o'clock at night. So you'll never get an area or a gig as cool as you did in the Marquee. Now, please, if you have been to the Marquee and you've seen some incredible bands, and I'm sure you have along the way, Guns N' Roses played in here as well. And the dedication they have there, of course, is to Keith Moon. So this was the venue of the incredible Marquee Club, one of the best venues in the entire of London. Now, if you were looking for late night gigs and you wanted to know where the extra parties were going to be taking place, or if you wanted a last minute ticket for a gig, one of the best places in London to get a drink, but also to hang out. You could be standing at the bar here and standing beside the likes of Rory Gallagher or Gary Moore. They'd be all hanging out inside in the Ship pub. Now, we are kind of losing the idea of the Great British Pub through gentrification. You know, where you can still get a jukebox and a killer sounds on the jukebox and you can get a pint of ale. Nowadays, it's a lot more champagne and the gentrification of pubs and quinoa and avocados, coffee and avocados in Soho. But if you really want to get a feeling of what it's all about inside here, pop into the Ship pub. So one of the most famous pubs in London, the Ship, is literally just down the road from the Marquee Club. If you wanted a last minute ticket or you wanted to know what was happening in the Marquee, this is the pub you came to. The bar staff are great in here. They'll tell you stories about the Sex Pistols hanging out in here and Jimi Hendrix hanging out in here, Mick Jagger particularly as well. But the reason I'm stopping you here is we often pop in here on our rock and roll tour and have a little sifter along the way. It's all part of the rock and roll experience and definitely one of my favorite pubs. Soho has seen a massive gentrification. You get a lot of coffees and avocados and tapas and quinoa, etc. But this is one of those authentic British pubs. And you never know who you'll meet inside here over the years as well. So definitely pop in here, but its proximity to one of the most famous studios and recording studios in London is the reason we're stopping here. And I want to start with Paul McCartney. Now, Paul McCartney was a party boy. There's no doubt about that. As of course he would be. He's the front of the Beatles. a head man of the Beatles, or the front man of the Beatles, let's just say, and he loved to party. And Soho was their hunting ground. Now, earlier on, I took you up to Savile Row. And Savile Row really doesn't have anything in that area in the form of nightclubs or bars or atmosphere, etc., just the tailors. It's the same with Abbey Road. Now, obviously, we don't go to Abbey Road on this particular tour. It's a bit too far away. But there's nothing really up there apart from the pedestrian crossing and the actual studios itself. But the one thing that Paul McCartney did find was an incredible recording studio around the corner. Now, some of you will be familiar with the song Mary Hopkins, Those Were the Days, My Friends. Now, Paul McCartney heard this recording, and he was so impressed by the sound recording and the recording on the album of this particular song that he wanted to find out where it was recorded. And he brought the Beatles here, and he found out it was recorded here in the Trident studios. And that's going to be our next stop. I'll just give you a bit of background before we head down there, because it's quite a narrow path. Now, the Trident Studios was the first studio in London to have an 8-track recording disc. Now, Abbey Road only had a 4-track. It was also the first studio in London to use Dolby surround sound to eliminate background noise in digital music. So Paul McCartney was so impressed. He's found this amazing, tiny little quaint studio in the middle of Soho, all the bars in the area, the Marquee Club, the Ship, the Bricklayers Arms Pub, Carnaby Street, and he was delighted. So he decided to bring the Beatles here, and this is where they recorded Hey Jude. Now, an incredible track, of course, as well, and took quite a bit. So Paul McCartney was so enamored with the place. The minute the Beatles, everybody heard that the Beatles had recorded here, naturally, everybody wanted a piece of the pie. So it literally became the place to record in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. So Paul McCartney gets annoyed because now he's found this little gem and everybody wants to get inside there, and there was rumours of bands trying to record there at 4 and 5 in the morning. So later on in years, when he was recording with Wings, Paul McCartney decided to block book the studio so he could use it at his leisure whenever it suited him. So that meant a lot of bands actually recorded on Paul McCartney's time. And one particular band arrived here that morning to record super early in the morning. The guy inside there sees his opportunity to make a little bit of extra cash. He decides, you know what, get in, get out, do what you need to do. But if Paul McCartney shows up, you gotta go. And that band, ladies and gents, was Queen. And in this very building is where they recorded or finished the recording of the most famous song in the world, the #1 song on every Billboard chart in the world, and the top #1 song on any list, whether it be Rolling Stone or NME, Bohemian Rhapsody, which is quite interesting because it was recorded on Paul McCartney's time. Not that I'm sure Paul McCartney minded afterwards. I do believe that there's some story that Queen actually tried to reimburse Paul McCartney for the studio time, but of course he said, listen, don't worry about it. I'm sure money wasn't on his mind. He wasn't too bothered. But not only that, ladies and gents, you also had David Bowie. This is where he recorded, as you can see there, the albums Hunky Dory and The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and The Spiders from Mars, Space Oddity, David Bowie. Not only that, Carly Simon, You're So Vain, Get Your Yayas Out, The Rolling Stones, Harry Nilsson, I Can't Live, Elton John, Candle in the Wind, and what was voted the #1 Elton John song in the UK. Your song, Elton John. Quite a few people around, so take no notice. So this incredible, tiny little quaint recording studio here in London, people don't even know it exists. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Carly Simon, everybody recorded inside this building. Now, most people ask me, is it still a recording studio? And yes, it is, but now it's more for dubbing for commercials and voiceovers for commercials, etc. But a huge piece of rock and roll history in London, the Trident Studios. So just a quick mention again, folks, this is just a highlight tour, and I just want to give you an example of what we will expand upon here in London, and particularly in the Soho area and on this rock and roll tour. Now, naturally, we have several other tours that you can take virtually with us, so please like and subscribe to Free Tours by Foot. If you like what you see, ladies and gents, you will be given notifications of more other tours that I will be doing in the future. A couple of more in the pipeline along the way, but if you haven't seen the City of London or the City of Westminster, please take a little look, and a like and a subscribe generates a lot of income for us as well as tour guides. Again, if you would like to buy me a coffee or buy me a drink, maybe you'll be able to do that in person when you come back to London and we head into the ship for a little quick sifter along the way, you can do so in the link below. So more importantly, just like and subscribe. And we're coming to the end of this tour, but I saved the best till last. Let me take you to see one of the most famous jazz clubs in the world, Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club. So we left the best till last, ladies and gents, the incredible Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club. Now, Ronnie Scott's is an institution here in London, originally formed in Chinatown in 1959, but the location and the premises moved here to in 1965. Now, it's the who's who again of rock and roll royalty. Now, Ronnie Scott himself actually performed on the Lady Madonna track. He was a saxophonist on that. It really transformed that song, the Beatles song, Lady Madonna. But over the years, you've seen all the jazz greats have played here. Miles Davis, Ella Fitzgerald, Prince has been live on stage inside in this building. And just for your own point of interest, they are doing live streams at the moment. It's just saying here, so I'm just reading it myself at the moment. To book and attend the stream in person, you can go to their website. Now, Ronnie Scott's jazz music was the first time it was heard in this particular club. But not only that, The Who performed the rock opera Tommy live on stage here for the very first time. And ladies and gentlemen, what makes it most infamous is this is the very last place Jimi Hendrix played live on stage in London before that very fateful night where he died of an overdose. Now, Jimi Hendrix came here that night with his girlfriend at the time to see a band called War. Now, remember I spoke to you earlier on about Chaz Chandler was Jimi Hendrix's agent. He was the bass player with the Animals. Well, Eric Burdon was the lead singer, and he was debuting his band War. So Jimmy came along to support them on the night, and he saw him in the audience, so he invited him up on stage. And Jimi Hendrix got up on stage and he jammed with War that particular night. Now, when he left that night, obviously he died in very controversial circumstances. And in fact, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories as to how Jimi Hendrix actually died on the night. What we have heard from the statement is, of course, that Jimi Hendrix asphyxiated on his own vomit due to barbiturates. He had trouble sleeping, of course. We all know Jimmy liked to take a lot of substances to bring him all the way up here, but of course, he had a penchant for sleeping pills. And that particular night, he had no sleeping pills left. He took 9 of his girlfriend's sleeping pills, and if he had read the instructions, he was only meant to take a half. So it was found unresponsive, and the cause of death, of course, was by asphyxiation of his own vomit. But he left us with a legacy of music. It's incredible to think that Jimi Hendrix was here for that short space of time, and we're still speaking about him today. But there's one other thing I want to show you before I wrap up this tour today. And this is the incredible thing about free tours. And you never know what you're going to see in London. And you always have to be observant. So it's always good to have a guide with you. Ladies and gentlemen, on this very street alone here in Soho, all these famous people have played inside here. Jimi Hendrix's last gig. And if you take a quick look behind you there, Erin is going to show you now on the camera. This is where Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart lived. And the best cup of coffee in London, of course, is in Bar Italia. If you take a look above Bar Italia, John Logie Baird actually demonstrated the very first demonstration for the television here in London in that very room. Now, you tell me where in the world would you find that, ladies and gentlemen? Jimi Hendrix, Logie Baird, and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So hopefully you enjoyed the tour today, ladies and gents. It's the only way we can bring this information to you at the moment. But of course, we are really excited about welcoming you back in person again. If you liked what you see and you enjoyed the tour, please, again, like and subscribe. If you have any questions with regards to the tour today, ladies and gents, please don't hesitate to ask. I do try to personally reply to any of the comments in the comment section. Like and subscribe. And of course, if you'd like to buy me a drink or a cup of coffee, you're welcome to do so. My PayPal link is below, and the Buy Me a Coffee link is also there as well. But more importantly, thank you very much for joining us today. Again, ladies and gents, check out the other tours on the site. In the meantime, I'll be seeing you very soon again. We'll be taking you on a trip through the East End and along the South Bank of London. Thanks again, and thanks for joining me. See you soon.